What's up, everyone? Hey, I wanted to get another ABG video out to you guys. This one's a little bit different. This one, we're talking about that vaunted COPD patient. We gave you, or I gave you the algorithm last time, but there's always patients that never, ever want to follow by the rules. Well, that COPD is that patient that is not that rule breaker, that person that doesn't want to follow the rules. So, I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about that patient. So with a COPD patient, their normals are a little bit different. Okay, their pH is still going to be 7.35 to 7.45, but their CO2 is going to be elevated. They're used to being short of breath all the time. They're used to retaining that CO2, that carbon dioxide. So their normal is plus or minus 10 from 60. Okay, when that happens, the body then compensates and elevates the normal bicarb for them as well. So you'll see their bicarb elevated north of 30 as well. So just know that their normals are a little bit different depending on the severity of their COPD. So I want to talk about that. I also want to talk about oxygenation. We didn't talk about oxygenation in any of the other videos, but normal oxygenation, this is arterial oxygenation. This isn't the SpO2 that we monitor the tissues. We're actually talking about the oxygen, the partial pressure of oxygen in the blood, the PaO2. Normal is 80 to 100. Okay. COPDers, they're used to being air hungry. They're used to that CO2 being elevated, and they're used to that O2 being decreased. So their normal is around 60 as well. Okay, plus or minus 10, um, plus or minus 10 for COPD of around that 60 millimeters of mercury. Okay. The other kind of patient that's a one-off with their oxygenation status is ARDS. ARDS patients, their normal is 55 to 85. I just looked at the ARDSNet protocol. I was helping a colleague out this past week, and we talked about ARDSNet and the normal PaO2 or the acceptable PaO2 for a patient who's in ARDS, and they would be in that 55 to 85 range. Okay. But when you have a COPDer, let's talk about a COPDer that we have, and you get a blood gas on them. So we're going to come up with a case real quick. Okay, you've got this oxygen dependent patient, COPD patient who wears 3 liters at home, but their concentrator goes out because the electricity went out. Okay, electricity goes out, concentrator goes out. So you have this patient who has a pH of 7.51. Let's see if we can highlight that a little bit. 7.51, a CO2 of 50, and an O2 of 41, and a bicarb of 36. So with this patient, okay, we automatically recognize that the CO2 is elevated, but with the COPD patient, it's not elevated for them, okay? For a COPD patient, this may be decreased based on their normal values, okay? And then you notice that their PaO2 is 41. We said that their normal, COPD's normal would be around 60, okay? Once that concentrator goes out, I'm no longer able to oxygenate. I'm no longer getting oxygen from the source that I'm used to, which then decreases the amount of oxygen that's attached to the hemoglobin traveling through the system, delivering to the different tissues. What happens when your patient is air hungry and they're trying to oxygenate and they don't have the adequate oxygen to do that? Their respiratory rate elevates. Okay? When you're short of oxygen, your respiratory rate elevates. And when it does that, that'll drop your CO2. So this patient right here, okay, whose normal COPD would be respiratory acidosis, a chronic ventilatory failure type patient, their CO2 is going to be 60, their PO2 is going to be around 60, and their bicarb is going to be around 30 or greater. So when we have this, okay, and that oxygen drops, your respiratory rate's going to increase to try to keep up with the demand for oxygen, When my respiratory rate goes up, my CO2 is going to go down. So in this case, I'm actually in a respiratory alkalosis as a result of being a COPDer who's air hungry, short of breath from not having the oxygen that they need. Okay. So when we have patients like this, we have to be mindful of what's actually happening with that patient. Okay. We can't just go blindly at this. We have to look at their history. We have to know what's going on with that patient and kind of have a background and know their pathology in order to truly diagnose and truly understand what's going on with this blood gas. So if I have a normal blood gas for a COPD patient, it's going to look something like this. Okay. Normal COPD patient is going to have a pH. Let's get that pen to work. pH is going to be, again, 7.35 to 7.45, but probably on the acidotic side. My CO2 is going to be anywhere from, it's going to be 60 plus or minus 10. And then your O2 is going to be in that same range, 60 plus or minus 10. And your bicarb is going to be greater than or equal to 30. So with this patient, again, excuse the handwriting. When you have this patient here who's got a CO2 that's less than 60, with it being a COPD patient, you know that they're hyperventilating. You know that they're blowing off that CO2, which is what's bringing their pH up. That a result of that O2 being low, the COPD patient here, whose concentrator's gone out, no longer is getting the oxygen that they need in order to adequately oxygenate the rest of their body. So they're having to hyperventilate, which is dropping their CO2, then bringing their pH up. If you go back and you reference one of the very first video here, respiratory opposite, okay, they are work indirectly with each other, okay, they work opposite of each other. CO2 goes down, the pH goes up, and that is a direct result of the O2 being so low for this patient. So we need to be mindful. We love to use algorithms and we love to have tools that work. However, we need to be mindful of patients and pathologies and when there are exceptions to the rule. And COPD is one of those patients that would be the exception to the rule. Again, I just wanted to quickly overview a patient that is a COPDer that doesn't fit the mold of that normal or acceptable range for every other normal patient. If you have any questions, if there's other patients that you want to discuss, other pathologies that you would love to discuss, shoot them in the comments. Be sure that you subscribe. Be sure that you like this video. If there's anything else that you want to talk about, okay, if there's anything else that you want to talk about, shoot me some questions. I would be happy to try and make this as simple as possible for you guys. I hope you have a wonderful day.